The scanner's readings made no sense. Tomas Raske wiped the device, trying again. 20 kilometers beneath New Thesal's surface, the rock face registered a staggering 40 degrees C above baseline. "Diego, are you seeing this?" he asked into his helmet. His twin, monitoring from the medical station above, replied, "Your thermals are all over the place. Likely interference." Tomas ran his gloved hand across the wall, searching for vibrations. 20 years of mining had taught him to read stone like a book. This was wrong. The rock hummed with a disturbing frequency. "Get Wang to shut down the borer. Something's not right," Tomas stated. The fusion borer's rumble ceased, leaving only recycled air and distant drips. In the sudden quiet, he heard it, a rhythmic thrum from the stone's heart. His headlamp revealed the impossible. The tunnel wall pulsed with bioluminescence. Veins of light raced through the rock, forming neural-like patterns. "Shaft 7 to control," Thomas said. "We need to halt operations. I'm seeing..." The borer lurched forward. Someone had restarted it remotely. "Negative, Shaft 7. We're behind schedule. Mark it for inspection. Keep drilling." The fusion beam tore through the rock. In that heartbeat, Tomas saw a cavity teeming with structures that throbbed with living light. Then the thermal shockwave hit. The borer operator didn't even scream. Tomas flung himself aside as the walls exploded with panicked light. He shouted, "Contact! Multiple hostiles in Shaft 7. A biothermal pulse turned the air where he'd stood into ice. His combat engineer instincts kicked in. 15 colonists, 3 emergency exits. "All personnel, fall back to checkpoint 3, Thomas ordered, moving towards the manual override. "Diego, I need you to..." His brother's voice cut in. "Your biosigns are spiking. Heart rate 116s and climbing." The Umbrath, creatures of living light, poured through the breach. Their weapons, if that's what they were, looked grown, channeling thermal energy. One caught Jensen, the survey tech. Tomas forced focus on the override, a 30-second activation sequence. "Get to the shaft!" he roared, Wang guiding the survivors. A thermal pulse hit Tomas, ice forming on his arm. He held the controls. "Get out of there!" Diego's voice was laced with fear. Another pulse caught him in the ribs. His vision blurred. The Umbrath paused, seemingly puzzled. One, larger than the rest, gestured with its limbs. "Almost there!" Thomas gasped, blood from his nose. He just needed it. The ceiling gave way. The blast door sealed, separating him from the main shaft and plunging him into darkness. With his helmet's flickering light, damaged by the cave-in, strobing wildly, he saw it. A colossal Umbrath. Up close, its internal structure was horrifyingly visible organs, pulsing rhythmically, echoing the vibrations he'd felt in the walls. This wasn't an invader. This belonged here, a sacred entity they'd brutally violated. Diego's panicked voice crackled over comms. "Static!" The rockfall had severed their connection. Tomas struggled, his leg trapped, the spreading ice from thermal blasts numbing his nervous system. The Umbrath emitted a sound-not speech, but harmonized light rendered audible. Others joined, their bioluminescence weaving intricate, mesmerizing patterns. Despite the encroaching cold, Tomas found himself captivated by its unearthly beauty. His final conscious thought, before oblivion claimed him, was that Diego would never believe he was gone, his stubborn twin. Topside, Diego watched his brother's life signs vanish. The medical station's alarm shrieked as Thomas's vital statistics plummeted. Heart rate 0, blood oxygen 0, neural activity 0. The mining suit's sophisticated sensors painted a grim picture. Massive trauma, hypothermia, complete biological shutdown. "Medic, I need you at triage 1. A voice, strained with barely concealed panic, crackled over his comm. "Casualties incoming from Shaft 7. Diego remained frozen, studying Tomas's final 30 seconds of biometric data, a pattern in the cardiac arrest that defied hypothermia. Gravitational sensors showed the cave-in, yet the temperature readings were erratic. Pockets of intense cold juxtaposed with areas of searing heat. "Triage 1 now," he was ordered. He saved the data, his mind reeling. Survivors arrived, Huang supporting burned miners, Okunquo's security team, carrying Jensen's frozen corpse. Diego worked mechanically, applying thermal gel, administering anti-shock medication, but his thoughts remained trapped in that forsaken shaft. Wang, his face etched with sorrow, sealed the door while Diego treated the burns. "Could have run," he whispered, his eyes haunted. "Stayed to seal the door." "Tell me exactly what you saw," Diego demanded, his voice raw with urgency. "The attackers, what were they?" Wang's description, despite its impossibility, chilled him. Translucent beings, moving like liquid mercury, weapons that froze, not burned, light patterns that hinted at communication, and beneath it all, the palpable sense of violating something ancient, something far older than humanity. By the time Diego finished treating the survivors, his decision was made. The colonial administration was already crafting a narrative. Equipment malfunction, unstable rock formations, a tragic accident. They would seal Shaft 7 and cover up the losses. But Diego had shared 39 years with Tomas. First words, first steps, their first mining suits. He knew his brother's rhythms like his own heartbeat. Those readings were wrong, the flat line too abrupt, too clean. Bodies don't simply cease, they fight, they cling to life. Tomas was alive, and Diego would bring him back. 6 hours later, he found Sergeant Yellen Okunquo in the colony bar, nursing synthesized whiskey. Her skin bore fresh thermal scars. Her fallen squad's tags hung like a macabre necklace. "I need someone who knows how they move," Diego said bluntly. Okunquo looked up, her eyes bloodshot. "They flow," she said, her voice weary, "like water finding cracks. Nothing like our training scenarios." "My brother's dead," Diego said. "No." He produced his tablet, displaying the biometric data. "Look at the cardiac pattern during arrest, the irregularity. That's not system failure, that's induced hibernation. I've seen it in cryo procedures gone wrong." Okunquo studied the data, her desperation igniting a spark of purpose. The whiskey bottle remained untouched. "Even if you're right," she said slowly, "colonial authority has sealed the site. No access to Shaft 7. I'm not asking for permission." Something shifted in her gaze. She stood, then straightened, her military bearing returning. "You'll need more than me. Those things, they're not like us. We need heavy ordnance." "I know where to get it," Diego replied, already envisioning repurposed mining charges, fusion cutters, industrial equipment. And he knew exactly who else to ask. They found Wang in Shaft 3, working alone, violating safety regulations after an accident. The veteran miner. When they approached, he didn't look up. "He had saved my nephew," Huang said, gazing at the rock face, that 2 years ago, during the Gamma collapse, he carried him 3 kilometers with a punctured lung. He turned, and Diego saw grief etched into every line of his face. "When do we go?" Diego asked. "As soon as we can gather equipment," he replied. "I need someone who can make mining charges do things they weren't designed for." A ghost of a smile touched Huang's lips. "I've been shaping charges for 20 years, son. Do you want surgical precision or maximum destruction?" "Both," Diego stated, "within 12 hours." Diego had assembled his team. Besides Okunquo and Hang, he'd recruited Maria Sandoval, a structural engineer who had lost her partner in the attack, and Pavel Vulov, Mail's younger brother, who worked in equipment maintenance and had access to nearly every security code in the colony. They met in an abandoned processing station, spreading equipment across rusted workbenches, fusion cutters to shape mining charges, emergency oxygen that could be overpressurized into improvised incendiaries. Diego had raided the medical supplies, filling his pack with stimulants, coagulants, and trauma gear. "The shaft is sealed," Okonkwo said, projecting a holographic map, "but mineral surveys show natural cavern systems that connect to the deep tunnels." Here and here, she marked positions with efficient gestures. "We make our own entrance." "What about the things down there?" Sandoval asked. "We can't fight what we don't understand." Diego pulled out a sealed sampler container. Inside, a piece of translucent tissue pulsed with a faint bioluminescence, a fragment taken from the suit of one of the survivors. "Then we better start understanding," he said, reaching for a microscope. 20 kilometers below, in a chamber that had never known sunlight, Keeper of Patterns studied her impossible specimen. The meat creature, she had no other term for the bizarre being, lay suspended in a biothermal containment field. By all logic, it should be dead. The trauma alone would have terminated any sensible organism. Yet scanners showed persistent biological activity beneath the induced hibernation. "Aberrant," she pulsed in light speech to her assistant, Weaver of Futures. "Observe the singular circulation pump. Where Umbrath possessed triple redundant hearts with backup vessels, this creature relied on one muscular organ to drive its entire circulatory system. The design is either supremely confident or catastrophically flawed." "Perhaps it grows replacements," Weaver suggested, patterns flickering with uncertainty. Keeper of Patterns extended a sensory appendage, taking new readings. What she found defied comprehension. The creature's blood carried armies, microscopic warriors that attacked anything foreign. Its bones were factories, constantly producing new cellular soldiers. The damaged tissue from their defensive thermal strikes was already beginning to repair itself, cells dividing at rates that should trigger tumorous growths, but somehow remained controlled. "Bring the deep scanners," she commanded. "I must understand this." The deep analysis revealed horrors upon horrors. When she triggered mild stress responses, slight temperature variations, pressure changes, the creature's biology transformed. Glands flooded its system with combat chemicals, muscle fibers restructured for explosive power. Its single heart somehow increased output by 300% without rupturing. "It burns itself," Weaver observed, aghast, consuming its own reserves for momentary advantage. But that wasn't the worst part. The genetic analysis showed these weren't random mutations or evolutionary accidents. The systems were interlinked, engineered to cascade damage. Triggered healing, threats triggered aggression. Aggression triggered biological overrides that turned the entire organism into a weapon. "They are made of things," Keeper of Patterns pulsed in harmonics of dread, "crafted for war." She thought of the histories, the deep memories preserved in thermal crystal. Her people had survived the Great Cooling, the star-touched plague, the arrival of surface dwellers. They had endured through adaptation, cooperation, careful harmony with their environment. But they had never encountered anything built to destroy. The human's eyes opened. Keeper of Patterns recoiled, her bioluminescence flashing alarm patterns. But the human didn't attack. Instead, it made sounds, harsh, guttural noises that might be communication. "Tomas," the human said, pointing at himself, then gesturing at her. "You Keeper of Patterns." She had lived for 3 centuries, had cataloged 17 distinct species, had once successfully communicated with the silicon-based drifters who passed through the deep tunnels. Nothing had prepared her for the horrifying intimacy of studying a human up close. Day 3 of examination, she pulsed to the recording crystal, maintaining scientific detachment despite her growing unease. Subject designation: Tomas continues to demonstrate impossible biological responses. She had tested his healing capacity with minor tissue sampling. Within hours, the wounds had closed, leaving only faint marks. When she'd restricted her caloric intake to observe metabolic adaptation, his body had shifted into a hyper-efficient state, somehow extracting energy from its own fat reserves while maintaining muscle mass. "Show the thermal cascade from yesterday's stress test," she instructed. Weaver of Futures, the holographic display bloomed with data. When exposed to a perceived threat, merely a sudden movement from one of her assistants, the human's body had transformed. Temperature elevation of 2 degrees, pupil dilation for enhanced light gathering, blood flow redistribution to major muscle groups. Most disturbing, pain receptors actually decreased sensitivity while sensory acuity increased. "It prepares for violence even when none is offered," Weaver observed. "The transformation is autonomous." "Worse," Keeper of Patterns corrected, "observe the neural patterns during the event." The scan showed something terrifying. The human's brain had literally rewired itself during the stress response, creating new pathways between motor control and spatial processing. He had unconsciously mapped every exit, calculated distances, identified potential weapons from harmless tools. A mind that thinks in destruction. Weaver's patterns dimmed with distress. How can such a thing evolve naturally? Perhaps it cannot, Keeper of Patterns admitted. The human had been attempting communication throughout. He quickly grasped that our bioluminescence carried meaning and had tried to replicate it using his helmet's damaged light. Crude attempts, but showing disturbing adaptability. She approached the containment field, modulating her natural glow to its least threatening pattern. Tomas watched her with those strange, forward-facing eyes, a predator's configuration for depth perception during pursuit. "Why?" she asked in simplified light speech. "Why are you made for killing?" He couldn't understand the question, but seemed to recognize the interrogative pattern. He gestured at the walls, then mimed digging motions. When that failed to convey meaning, he used his finger to draw in the condensation on the field barrier. Lines appeared, a cross-section diagram of tunnel systems. He pointed up, then drew crude figures, humans, then down, drawing different figures with elongated forms, a recognizable attempt at depicting Umbrath. Between them, he drew a barrier, then showed it being breached. He understands we were separated, Keeper of Patterns realized. He knows the breach was accidental. Thomas nodded, hopefully. Another predator trait, the aggressive forward motion of the head. He drew again the thermal vents her people depended on, somehow recognizing their importance from the brief glimpse during breakthrough. Then he sketched structural supports, barriers, ways to shore up the divide while maintaining the vent flows. He thinks of building? Weaver pulsed in confusion. Yet his biology speaks only of destruction. Unless... Keeper of Patterns extended her primary sensor cluster, taking new readings. What if the building and destroying are the same system? What if their violence is simply misdirected creation? Before she could pursue the thought, alarms flashed through the chamber. Deep sensors had detected explosions in the abandoned northern tunnels, precise shaped charges that opened new passages while avoiding structural weakness. More humans were coming. The shape charge detonated with both precision and power, as promised, opening a fist-sized hole in the tunnel wall. Wang examined his handiwork with satisfaction before placing the next charge. 12-inch cutting charge set, he reported to Diego. 40 seconds to breach. They'd been working for 6 hours, following mineral surveys that showed potential connections to the deep tunnel systems. Each exploration was calculated to minimize vibration. Too much force, and they'd trigger another cave-in. Diego rechecked his medical scanner, still hunting for any trace of Thomas's biosignature. The background radiation from the planet's core made readings unreliable beyond a few hundred meters. But he kept trying. "Movement," Oken Quo announced, her weapon trained on the shadows ahead. "Thermal variance at 2 o'clock. Hold fire," Diego ordered. We don't know if they're hostile. Bastards killed our people, Pavel Volkov said flatly. They were defending themselves, Sandoval countered. She'd been studying the attack patterns during their descent. Every strike was reactive, not initiative. We broke into their home. The charge detonated, revealing a natural cavern beyond. Bioluminescent formations provided dim light, similar to what the survivors had described, but more subdued. Living architecture, Diego realized. The Umbra hadn't just inhabited these caves, they'd shaped them over centuries. Biosensors picking up something. Human baseline, he said, hope flaring. Extremely faint, bearing 17 Mark V. That's directly through their territory. No way around, Okonkwo observed. Then we go through. Diego checked his equipment one last time. The tissue sample he'd studied had revealed the Umbra's critical weakness. Their triple redundant biology made them extremely sensitive to. Thermal readings confirm readiness. Huang has given the go-ahead. But Diego, these aren't weapons. They're for extraction. Everything can be a weapon if wielded correctly, Okonkwo stated with grim determination. Formation, she commanded. We move swiftly, strike hard, and harvest before they can marshal their forces. They advanced into the unknown, descending into tunnels that were organic marvels. The walls spiraled in intricate geometric patterns, expertly guiding airflow. Carefully integrated thermal vents provided both warmth and illumination, a testament to engineering Diego's pragmatic mind could truly appreciate, even as they infiltrated. Their first encounter was with an Umbrath, seemingly a technician, working on a ruptured thermal conduit. It turned at their approach, its bioluminescence flashing a clear alarm. Okonkwo unleashed a foam blast from the mining suppression gun, designed for sealing gas leaks but equally effective at incapacitating living beings. Clear, she declared, pressing forward. No alarm sounded. Yet Diego had glimpsed something in the creature's signaling, a nuance missed by the foam. It hadn't merely registered their presence, it had attempted communication. They pressed onward, following the faint reading on his scanner. More Umbrath appeared, their responses varied and perplexing. Some fled immediately, while others stood their ground, flashing complex patterns that could have been warnings or attempts at dialogue. Only when the humans advanced, despite these signals, did they turn hostile. They're attempting discourse, Sandoval observed after their third encounter. These light patterns, there's a structure, a syntax. It matters little, Pavel countered, checking his cutter's charge. Our objective is Tomas. The biosignal intensified as they descended. Diego's heart pounded as familiar rhythms pulsed on his scanner. His brother's cardiac pattern, altered but undeniably his. He's in stasis, Diego whispered, recognizing the forced metabolic suspension. But he's alive. They rounded a bend, emerging into a vast chamber. At its heart, suspended within a shimmering field, was Tomas. Surrounding him, dozens of Umbrathi worked at devices of unfathomable complexity. One, larger than the rest, and adorned with more intricate patterns, turned to face them. The Keeper of Patterns had anticipated their arrival, observing their advance through deep sensors, cataloging their aggression, their weaponry, confirming her deepest fears about human nature. Yet a subtle unease persisted. Their measured application of force, the precision of their explosives to preserve the structural integrity, the care shown for their injured comrade after each skirmish. She stepped forward, her patterns modulating to their most elementary form. Stop, think, observe. The lead human, smaller than the suspended figure but sharing similar facial features, kept his weapon raised but made no move to fire. His eyes, those unnerving predator's orbs, flickered between her and the suspended form. Tomas, the human stated, a designation of identity, then indicated himself. Diego, brothers, genetic duplicates, with variations. She had analyzed the tissue samples, comprehending the astonishing capacity of human genetics for both diversity and similarity. These two shared fundamental patterns, expressed in unique ways. She moved deliberately toward the control crystals, dimming the containment field just enough for Diego to see his brother clearly. Tomas was unharmed, held in therapeutic stasis, his injuries mending under careful observation. He is well, she conveyed in light speech, then attempted something unprecedented, modulating her throat sacs in an effort to mimic human sound. Alive. The effect on the humans was immediate and profound. Weapons were lowered fractionally. Diego stepped forward, extending his medical scanner. She allowed the examination, watching him confirm her message. "He's all right," Diego reported to his team. "Healing. They're treating him." "It's a deception," Pavel insisted. "They're studying him, seeking weaknesses." The Keeper of Patterns understood the undertone, if not the specific words. She turned to her workstation, activating holographic displays of her research, cascading combat protocols, biological weapon systems, all the horrors she had documented. But also Tomas's sketches, his engineering solutions, his persistent attempts at communication, despite their differences. She gestured toward Diego, then to the displays. Understanding dawned in his eyes as he saw his brother's biology laid bare. The stress responses, the healing factors, the combat adaptations. "You believe us to be weapons," Diego said slowly, his voice carrying a question. "You think we are engineered for destruction?" She couldn't comprehend the words, but sensed the inquiry in his tone. She summoned more data, human history files, recovered from their colonial archives, centuries of wars, violence, and devastation. Diego studied the images, then did something unexpected. He lowered his weapon and retrieved his medical kit. Moving with deliberate slowness, he extracted a trauma injector and rolled up his sleeve. Before anyone could intervene, he made a deep incision along his forearm. "Diego!" Okonkwo exclaimed, moving forward, but he raised a hand to halt her. Blood welled from the wound. Diego held it up for the Keeper of Patterns to see, then applied the injector. Within moments, coagulation commenced, the bleeding ceased, and healing accelerated. The team sprang to action, Diego gesturing at the displays showcasing the process. He then took Okonkwo's knife, slicing insulation from her suit and using tape to cover a coolant leak. "Same systems," he murmured, hoping the demonstration transcended language. The Keeper of Patterns observed, captivated by human biology repurposed for healing, for building, for survival, the paradox unraveling. She made a life-altering decision, initiating the release sequence. "Wait," Weaver of Futures flashed warnings. "Protocols are only as dangerous as their use," Keeper of Patterns responded, meeting Diego's gaze, those predator eyes that also focused with such precision. The stasis field vanished, and Tomas gently lowered to the floor. Diego's medical scanner and hands worked rapidly. "Hypothermic trauma, mild neural suppression. He'll be fine," Diego confirmed, looking at Keeper of Patterns. A universal thank you. Then, alarms blared, a bioluminescent shriek announcing the unthinkable. Humans in the sacred chambers, the Keeper collaborating. Umbrath's response was brutal. Okonkwo's warning preceded a thermal blast, freezing the air where Diego had stood. "Covering fire!" Okonkwo roared, forcing the Umbrath back. "Wang, we need an exit!" The veteran miner scanned the structure. A shaped charge could breach a wall, but the heating network. Keeper of Patterns watched, her horror growing. The Council's verdict: humans were a contamination. Her attempts to explain were lost. Morathi flowed in, warriors with biothermal weapons. Diego's team retreated, using mining gear as shields. "Can't hold them," Sandoval reported, her arm useless. Tomas's eyes snapped open, his memory flooded. The cave-in, the cold, then a firefight. "About time you woke up," Diego said, his eyes on the threat. "Feel like helping?" Tomas felt sluggish, but his mind was clear, filled with 3 days of observations. He knew Keeper of Patterns. "The big one," he said, pointing. "She's friendly." A thermal blast interrupted. Pavel returned fire, but it was useless. "We're leaving," Okunquo shouted. "Wang, blow the wall." "No," Tomas forced himself upright. "The thermal vents. I think they need them to reproduce," Pavel snarled. "They think we're weapons." Tomas looked at the displays, then at Keeper of Patterns, flashing desperate patterns. An insane idea ignited. "Diego, I need a stimulant, maximum dose." The injector hit. The familiar fire of adrenaline surged. He stood, exposed, and began pulsing light patterns using his damaged helmet. "Stop, understand, build, together." The Umbrath hesitated. A human speaking their light language? Impossible. Their weapons faltered. Tomas pointed. The thermal vents. Watching the conflict's destruction, Tomas began drawing in the air, demonstrating how to reinforce Umbrath's biothermal systems, showcasing peaceful coexistence. "What is he doing?" Pavel questioned, bewildered. "Building," Diego whispered, understanding dawning. "He's showing them." A warrior unleashed an attack, a torrent of aggression. Instead of dodging, Tomas stepped forward, absorbing the blast. Ice spread through his suit, hypothermia ravaging him, yet he kept signaling, drawing, proving humans could protect. The warrior ceased fire. Keeper of Patterns, astonished, had never seen anything like it. A being burning himself to bridge a gap, his temperature plummeting, yet neural activity surged. He was sacrificing himself. She moved to support him as he collapsed. The other humans reacted instantly, Diego rushing forward. "He needs serious medical attention," Diego reported. Tension filled the chamber. Then Tomas, shivering, removed his helmet, his only communication tool, offering it to Keeper of Patterns. She understood immediately. She could speak to his people. Examining the damaged light, she found the correct connections, pulsing. "These ones, not weapons," she signaled. "Tools, like thermal shapers, can destroy, can create. They choose." The lead warrior showed skepticism. "They burn themselves for power. No harmony, only violence." Keeper of Patterns gestured at Tomas, still drawing diagrams. "They burn for others, for connection, for building." Turning to Diego, she pointed to Tomas, then to the exit. "She's letting us go," Sandoval breathed. "All teams, prepare for extraction," Okunquo ordered. Diego and Wang lifted Tomas. His eyes fluttered open, focusing on Keeper of Patterns. She raised a hand. He weakly mirrored the gesture. Extraction was tense, Umbrath warriors shadowing them. At each checkpoint, Keeper of Patterns pulsed safe passage codes. They reached the breach. "Wait," Tomas mumbled. "The vents, the borer, have to rest." "No," he rasped. "We'll return. We'll fix. Promise." She understood more than the words. As they passed through the breach, she gave Diego a biocrystal, etched with a message. The colonial administration's response was predictable, but they hadn't counted on the Raz twins' stubbornness. "Absolutely not," Director Hope insisted. "It was a gas pocket." "Then explain this," Diego said, placing the biocrystal on her desk. It pulsed with light. Keeper of Patterns' request for a technological exchange. Even through the crude medium, her intelligence shone. Hope's voice trembled. "It was a technical schematic. Recovery from hypothermia and stimulant overdose," Tomas corrected. "Keeping him weak, but his mind sharp. They're showing us how to repair the thermal systems we damaged and suggesting improvements." The debate might have lingered, but Wang, along with Pavel and other grieving miners, had acted. He'd modified drilling equipment, announcing, "We're going back down," presenting perfectly legal mineral survey forms. Rare earth deposits were in the lower tunnels, precisely where thermal vents needed reinforcement. Hope gazed at the paperwork, the biocrystal, the Rask twins' determined faces. "You're talking about unauthorized contact with an unknown species." "We're talking about fixing what we broke," Diego stated. 2 weeks later, the first joint engineering team descended. Thomas led, his helmet fitted with Umbrath light protocols. Diego carried medical supplies for both species. Wang brought precision mining gear. Oken Kuo provided security. The Keeper of Patterns met them at the agreed coordinates. The Warriors' Council had protested her decision, but without repair, 3 breeding grounds would fail. Pragmatism had won. The work was slow, meticulous. Humans discovered Umbrath biotechnology responded to unheard sonic frequencies, while Umbrath learned human tools achieved a precision their thermal shaping couldn't. When Tomas successfully integrated human structural support with an Umbrath thermal conduit, both teams paused in shared wonder. "It's working," the Keeper of Patterns managed in heavily accented English. "That's the only way it works," Thomas replied, first in light patterns, then verbally. 6 months later, the shared zones pulsed with a new rhythm. Human and Umbrath engineers exchanged greetings, blending pigeon-like speech and broken English. Diego's thermal exchange stations powered human operations while warming Umbrath breeding grounds. Tomas watched engineers debate load-bearing calculations, their heated but professional disagreement, a testament to finding common ground. "Still think we're weapons?" Diego asked, joining him, carrying a medical kit marked for both species. "When you push through damage that should stop you, when you coordinate without words, when you burn yourselves for others," the Keeper of Patterns approached, her English vastly improved. "Weapons can build this. We learned." An alarm signaled a shift change. Human workers departed as Umbrath flowed in. The handoff was seamless, practiced. "The Council wants to expand the program," the Keeper of Patterns continued. "Other colonies have deep dwellers. Perhaps not all first contacts must be..." She searched for the word. "Catastrophic." "Just need the right translators," Thomas murmured, touching the thermal scars on his chest. "People willing to stand in the middle." 2 humans and an Umbrath watched their species work side by side. The combat protocols that had terrified the Keeper of Patterns, the drive to push through, adapt, and protect, were still present, but context mattered. "Next week we breach the southern caverns," the Keeper of Patterns announced. "New thermal system, very delicate." "We'll be careful," Tomas promised. Walking back, he reflected on the slender margin between fear and understanding. The Umbrath had been right. Humans were engineered for survival, capable of seeming monstrous, but survival meant adaptation, cooperation, a stubborn refusal to let differences divide. His chest scars ached. Some bridges, he knew, required pain to build, but they held.